An original werewolf story, written by Wicked Serenity Library. The Luna's Betrayal Introduction. I caught my husband inside my sister the same day I found out I was pregnant with his child. That's the moment my life split into before and after. Before, when I was Luna Thalindra of Mountain Shadow Pack, respected, titled, trapped. After, when I became a ghost, disappeared into the wind with his air growing in my belly, and his betrayal carved into my chest like claw marks that would never heal. They say the moon goddess has a plan for everyone, that suffering shapes us into who we're meant to become, that broken hearts make room for stronger love. They're wrong. Some betrayals don't make you stronger. They hollow you out, scoop everything soft from inside your ribs, leave you walking around like a breathing corpse pretending the world still has color. But I had to survive. Not for me. I would have let myself drown. I survived for the child my ex-husband doesn't know exists. For the pup I'll die protecting. But 3 years of hiding, 3 years of safety, 3 years of slowly learning to breathe again, all of it shattered the moment I walked into that meeting and saw his face. And now he knows. He knows about our son. He knows where I've been. And according to pack law, the pup belongs to him. So, what do? Run again? Fight? Surrender my child to a man who destroyed me, or accept help from the alpha who's offering me a second chance at something I thought was dead? Choose wrong, and I lose everything. But here's the thing about broken women. We've already lost everything once. The second time, we don't go down quiet. Chapter 1. 8 years of marriage. 8 years of prayers that went unanswered. 8 years of my womb staying empty while pack whispers filled the space my child should have occupied. I pressed my forehead against the cold stone wall of our bedroom, feeling the roughness bite into my skin. Dawn was breaking across mountain shadow territory, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that would have been beautiful if I could still feel beauty. The forest stretched endlessly below our window, ancient pines standing sentinel over land my bloodline had protected for 6 generations. But standing here, in this room, in this life, I felt like a stranger wearing someone else's skin. My fingers traced the mortar between the stones, following the grooves carved by time and weather. Solid. Real. Unlike the promises that had been whispered to me in this very room, in that very bed behind me. The bed I couldn't look at anymore without feeling my stomach twist. The moon goddess works in her own time. Luna Thalindra. Oracle Vishara's words from last week still echoed in my head, her voice raspy with age and smoke from those ceremonial herbs she burned. Her milky eyes had stared through me, seeing everything and nothing, while her gnarled fingers had hovered over my abdomen without touching, without finding anything, because there was nothing to find. I'd stopped believing in divine timing somewhere around year 3, right after Elder Morven had stood in the Great Hall during a pack council meeting and suggested, very carefully, very diplomatically, that Alpha Kavraith consider taking a second Luna. For the good of the pack's future, he'd said, not meeting my eyes, for the stability of the bloodline. Kavraith had snarled at him, had defended me with words sharp enough to draw blood. But I'd seen it in his eyes afterward, when we were alone. That flicker of consideration, that moment of wondering if maybe the elder was right. The apothecary downstairs smelled like desperation, like dried herbs and broken dreams and 8 years of failure. I'd memorized every jar on those shelves, starflower essence that tasted like dirt, moon petal root that made my hands shake, crimson sage that turned my tongue black for 3 days. I'd brewed them into teas so bitter I'd had to hold my nose to swallow them down, feeling them scald my throat and cramp my stomach. Nothing had worked. I'd invited healers from 6 different packs, each one more renowned than the last. Pack Dr. Jorveth from Iron Ridge, who'd spent 2 hours examining me with his healing touch, his brow furrowed in concentration. Dr. Celine from Mistwood Glen, who'd made me drink a potion that had me vomiting for 2 days straight. Even that ancient crone from the Wandering Moon Pack, the The one who smelled like decay and whispered incantations in a language that made my wolf whimper and press herself flat in the back of my mind. Physically sound, they'd all concluded, one after another, their diagnoses identical and useless. Your body is capable, Luna. There is no physical reason you cannot conceive. Capable, that word tasted like ash in my mouth, because every month, like clockwork, my cycle arrived. Punctual, merciless, a death sentence written in blood. I'd learned to hide the evidence, burning the cloths in the fireplace in the dead of night, when even the guards were half asleep at their posts. I'd learned to keep my face neutral when Beta Corin's mate announced her third pregnancy. I'd learned to smile and offer congratulations when pack members brought their newborn pups to be blessed. I'd learned to be a ghost in my own life, the barren Luna, the broken mate, the woman who'd caught an alpha's heart but couldn't carry his legacy. Behind me, I heard movement from the bed, the rustle of sheets. A low groan as Cavraith woke, stretching muscles still sore from yesterday's border patrol. I didn't turn around, couldn't bear to see those amber eyes of his, still soft with sleep before reality crashed back in, and he remembered what I was. What I wasn't. Thalindra? His voice was rough, thick with sleep. How long have you been up? Not long. The lie slipped out easily. I'd been standing here for over an hour, watching the sunrise, counting my failures like prayer beads. I heard him get out of bed, heard his bare feet on the stone floor as he crossed the room to me. His hands settled on my shoulders, warm and heavy, and I had to force myself not to flinch. Not because I didn't want his touch. Gods, I craved it like air, but because every touch now felt weighted with expectation, with disappointment. You're thinking too much again. His breath was warm against my ear as he leaned down, pressing his lips to the mark on my neck. The mark he'd given me 5 years ago, binding us as chosen mates. It should have been enough. Why wasn't it enough? Someone has to, I said, aiming for lightness and missing by miles. His hands tightened slightly on my shoulders. The council meeting is today. I closed my eyes. Of course it was. Another meeting where the elders would dance around the subject of heirs and bloodlines and the future of the pack. Another meeting where I'd sit beside Cavraith's throne and feel every gaze on me, measuring my worth by the emptiness of my womb. I haven't forgotten. They won't say anything, not after last time. They don't have to say anything, Cavraith. Their silence says enough. He turned me around to face him, his amber eyes searching mine. He was beautiful in the morning light, broad-shouldered and strong, with dark hair that fell just past his jaw, and a face that still made my heart stutter. Even now, even after everything. I chose you, he said, his voice fierce, not because of pups or heirs or bloodlines. I chose you because you saved me when I wanted to die, because you're strong and fierce and barren. The word came out flat, final. Don't. His jaw clenched. Don't say that word. Why not? Everyone else is thinking it. I don't care what everyone else thinks. You should. I pulled away from him, wrapping my arms around myself. You're the alpha. You need an heir, and I can't give you one. We don't know that. 8 years, Cavraith. I turned back to the window, unable to look at him anymore. 8 years of trying. 8 years of healers and oracles and prayers. When do we stop lying to ourselves? Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I could feel his wolf rising, could sense the frustration and helplessness radiating off him in waves. But what could he say? What words existed to fix this? Get dressed, he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. The council meets in an hour. He left the room without another word, and I was alone again with the sunrise and my failure. The great hall was exactly as suffocating as I'd expected. I sat in the Luna's chair beside Cavraith's throne, my back straight and my face carefully blank. The elders sat in a semicircle before us, 12 of them, ancient and weathered, their eyes holding centuries of pack knowledge and judgment. Beta Corin stood to Cavryth's right, his expression carefully neutral. Gamma Theron was on the left, his massive arms crossed over his chest. The meeting droned on. Border disputes, trade agreements with the Iron Ridge Pack, plans for the upcoming Harvest Festival, all matters that required the Alpha's attention, and none that required mine. I was decoration, a pretty figurehead sitting in a chair that demanded more than I could give. And finally, Elder Morven said, his voice thin with age, we must discuss the matter of succession. My spine went rigid. Beside me, I felt Cavryth tense. We've discussed this, Cavryth said, his voice dropping into that dangerous register that made lesser wolves submit. Extensively. And yet, nothing has changed, Alpha. Elder Seraphine spoke up, her white hair braided intricately around her head like a crown. 8 years without an heir puts the pack at risk. Should something happen to you, nothing will happen to me. You cannot guarantee that. You lead hunts. You fight in territorial disputes. You put yourself in danger regularly, as an alpha must. But without an heir, without a clear line of succession, the pack would fracture. Then I'll name Beta Corin as my successor. Corin's head snapped toward Cavryth, surprise written across his face. Alpha, With respect, Elder Morven interrupted, a beta successor is a temporary solution. The pack needs a bloodline heir. Your heir. My mate will give me an heir when the moon goddess wills it, Cavryth said, his hand finding mine on the armrest, squeezing hard. Until then, this discussion is closed. And if the moon goddess never wills it? Elder Seraphine's gaze shifted to me, sharp and assessing. If the Luna is simply incapable? The word hung in the air like poison gas. I felt it seep into my lungs, choking me from the inside out. Every person in that hall was staring at me now, their expressions ranging from pity to disdain to cold calculation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shift and tear out Elder Seraphine's throat for speaking that word, incapable, like it was fact rather than suspicion. I wanted to run from this hall, from this pack, from this life that had become a cage I couldn't escape. But I was Luna. So I sat perfectly still, my face a mask of calm, and said nothing. This meeting is over. Cavryth's voice cracked like a whip through the hall. All of you, out. Now. The elders exchanged glances, but didn't argue. They filed out slowly, their robes whispering against stone, until only Cavryth, Corin, and I remained. They're getting bolder, Corin said quietly. They're getting desperate. Cavryth released my hand and stood, pacing like a caged animal. They see weakness, and they're circling like vultures. Then give them what they want, I heard myself say. Both men turned to stare at me. What? Cavryth's voice was sharp. I stood, smoothing my skirts with hands that shook despite my best efforts. Take a second, Luna. Someone who can give you heirs. Someone who isn't broken. Thalindra. I release you from our bond. The words came out steady, even though my heart was shattering with each syllable. Take another mate. Someone worthy of... Cavryth was across the room in a heartbeat, his hands gripping my upper arms, his face inches from mine. Don't. You. Dare. Each word was punctuated with barely controlled fury. You are my mate. My Luna. I chose you, and I'm not unchosen you, because some ancient fools think bloodline matters more than love. But it does matter, Cavryth. To them. To the pack. Eventually, it will matter to you too. Never. He pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. I would rather watch this pack burn than lose you. Do you understand me? I wanted to believe him. Gods, I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But I'd seen the way he looked at other she-wolves when they cradled their pups. I'd felt the tension in his body when pack members brought their children to be blessed. I knew what he wanted, what he needed, even if he was too loyal or too stubborn to admit it. "I'll leave you two," Corin said awkwardly, slipping out of the great hall and closing the heavy doors behind him. Cavraith and I stood there, wrapped in each other, suspended in a moment that felt fragile as glass. His wolf was pressed against mine through our bond, offering comfort, offering love, offering everything except the one thing that would fix this. "I'm sorry," I whispered against his chest. "I'm so sorry I can't give you what you need. You give me everything I need, everything that matters." "That's not true, and we both know it." He pulled back, his hands cupping my face, his amber eyes blazing. "I love you, Thalindra. Not your womb, not your ability to produce heirs. You, the woman who sat beside me by that river when I was dying inside, the woman who made me remember why life was worth living. That's who I love. That's who I chose." Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not now. I love you too. That's why this hurts so much." He kissed me then, deep and desperate, like he could somehow convince me through touch that his words were truth. And for a moment I let myself believe, let myself sink into the warmth of his arms and pretend that love was enough. But love had never been enough. Not in pack politics, not when bloodlines and succession determined the survival of hundreds of wolves. We broke apart eventually, both breathing hard, both struggling with emotions too big to name. "I need to go," I said quietly. I just need to be alone for a while." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. He nodded, releasing me. "I'll see you at dinner?" "Of course." I left the great hall with my head high and my heart in pieces, nodding politely to pack members I passed in the corridors. No one could know. No one could see how close I was to breaking completely. I made it to my private study before the tears finally came. Chapter 2. The nausea hit me on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after that disastrous council meeting. I was reviewing supply ledgers with Beta Corin in my study, a small room on the second floor that had become my sanctuary. Numbers and logistics were soothing, predictable, unlike everything else in my life. "And if we increase the grain stores by 15% before winter," Corin was saying, his finger tracing columns on the parchment, "we should have enough to... Luna, are you all right?" The room had started tilting sideways. The numbers on the page were swimming, dancing, rearranging themselves into patterns that made no sense. My stomach lurched violently and I tasted bile rising in my throat. I managed to get out before my stomach revolted completely. I barely made it to the wash basin in the corner before I was vomiting, my body purging everything I'd eaten for breakfast. Corin was beside me instantly, holding my hair back, his concerned voice asking questions I couldn't process through the roaring in my ears. When the heaving finally stopped, I slumped against the wall, breathing hard, my skin clammy with cold sweat. "I'm getting the pack doctor," Corin said firmly. "No," I grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "It's nothing, just bad venison from last night." "You didn't eat venison last night. You had fish." Damn, he was right. I'd pushed the venison around my plate, unable to stomach the smell of it. "Then bad fish," I amended weakly. Corin's eyes narrowed, and I saw the wheels turning in his head. He was Beta for a reason. Intelligent, observant, always 3 steps ahead. "When was your last cycle?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't know. When had it been? 3 weeks ago? 4? My mind raced backward, counting days, and my heart started pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. 5 weeks. It had been 5 weeks since my last cycle. "I need to see Pack Dr. Aldwin," I heard myself say, my voice coming from very far away. "Right now. And Corin. Not a word to anyone. Not even Cavraith. Not until I know for certain." His expression softened with understanding. "Of course, Luna." Pack Dr. Aldwin's clinic was tucked behind the training grounds, a small stone building that always smelled like sage and healing herbs. I'd been here so many times over the past 8 years that I knew every crack in the walls, every stain on the floorboards. Aldwin looked up from his workbench when Corin and I entered, surprise flickering across his weathered face. He was ancient, easily past 70, with more white hair than gray, and hands that shook slightly until he called upon his healing gift. Then they steadied, infused with the moon goddess's power. "Luna Thalindra," he greeted, setting down the tincture he'd been mixing. "This is unexpected. Are you unwell?" "I need you to examine me," I said without preamble. "I need to know if I'm pregnant." The room went very still. Even Corin, standing by the door, seemed to stop breathing. Aldwin's eyes widened. "Of course. Please, lie down on the table." My legs felt like water as I crossed the small room and climbed onto the examination table. The leather was cool beneath my back, worn smooth by countless patients. I stared at the ceiling, rough wooden beams crossed with cobwebs, and tried to slow my racing heart. This had happened before. Twice, actually. Twice I'd been late, had felt hopeful, had let myself imagine a future where I held my own pup in my arms. And twice, Aldwin had examined me and shaken his head sadly, explaining that stress could delay cycles, that my body was playing tricks on my desperate mind. "Try to relax," Aldwin said gently, his hands hovering over my abdomen. I felt his healing gift activate, a warm, tingling sensation that spread from where his hands hovered, seeping through my skin and into my organs. He closed his eyes, his breathing deepening, his consciousness reaching into places my own awareness couldn't access. Seconds stretched into minutes. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms hard enough to draw blood. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe, didn't dare hope. Aldwin's eyes opened, and they were shining with tears. "Luna Thalindra," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're with child. About 5 weeks along, I'd estimate. The heartbeat is strong and steady." The world stopped. Just stopped. Sound disappeared. Color drained away. Time became meaningless. All that existed was those words, echoing in my head like thunder. "You're with child. With child. With child." "Are you—" I couldn't get the words out. My throat had closed completely. "Are you certain?" "I stake my life and my gift on it." Aldwin was smiling now, genuine joy radiating from him. "After 8 years of waiting, the moon goddess has finally blessed you and Alpha Kavraith. You're going to have a pup, Luna." Something broke inside my chest. Some dam I'd built to hold back 8 years of grief and disappointment and self-hatred. It shattered completely, and joy, pure, overwhelming, devastating joy, flooded through me like wildfire. I started laughing, or maybe crying, possibly both. My hands went to my stomach, pressing against the flat surface where a life was growing. A tiny heartbeat drumming away inside me. Real. Alive. Mine. "Thank you," I gasped out between sobs. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You should tell the Alpha immediately," Aldwin said, squeezing my shoulder. "He'll be overjoyed." Kavraith. God's Kavraith. 8 years he'd waited for this news. 8 years of defending me to the elders, of insisting we just needed more time, of loving me despite my failure. And now, finally, I could give him what he'd been waiting for. I could give him an heir. I slid off the examination table, my legs shaky but holding. Corin was grinning at me from the doorway, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Congratulations, Luna," he said warmly. "Not a word," I reminded him, but I was smiling so wide my face hurt. "I want to tell him myself." My lips are sealed. I practically ran from the clinic, my feet flying over packed earth. Pack members called out greetings as I passed, but I barely heard them. All I could think about was Kavraith's face when I told him. the joy that would light those amber eyes. The way he'd probably pick me up and spin me around, laughing like he used to before the weight of leadership had settled so heavily on his shoulders. The pack house loomed before me, massive and ancient, built from mountain stone that had stood for 300 years. I burst through the main doors, startling the guards posted there, and took the stairs 2 at a time. Our bedroom was on the 3rd floor. The Alpha's suite. Heavy oak door carved with phases of the moon, symbols of power and lineage, and everything we'd been unable to create. Until now. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely turn the handle. I was laughing and crying, and my heart was pounding, and I'd never felt more alive, more whole, more perfectly, brilliantly happy than I did in this single moment. I pushed the door open, already forming the words, "I'm pregnant, Cavraith. We're going to have a pup," when my world ended for the first time. They didn't notice me immediately. Too lost in each other. Too consumed by what they were doing on our bed. Our bed. The sheets I'd changed this morning. The pillows that still smelled like my hair. She was on top of him, her back arched, head thrown back in ecstasy. Long black hair cascaded down her spine like a waterfall of ink. Familiar, because I'd braided that hair 1,000 times when we were children. His hands were on her hips, claws extended, digging into her pale flesh and leaving red marks that would bruise purple by nightfall. The sounds they made, grunts and moans and whispered words I couldn't process, filled the room like poison gas. My hand was still on the door handle. My mouth was still open. Those words, "I'm pregnant," dying on my tongue. I couldn't breathe. My lungs had forgotten how. My heart was still beating, but it felt wrong, like it was pumping acid instead of blood. Every nerve ending in my body was screaming, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away, couldn't close the door and pretend I hadn't seen this. Cavraith's eyes opened first. Those amber eyes I loved. Those eyes that had looked at me with such tenderness this morning, such fierce devotion in the great hall 3 weeks ago. Those eyes that had promised me forever. They met mine across the room, and I watched every drop of color drain from his face. His mouth fell open. His hands released her hips. "Thalindra." The sound of my name in his voice, that voice that had whispered love and promises and lies, snapped something inside me. The woman turned, following his gaze, and my heart stopped completely. Azrienne, my sister, my blood. The woman who'd walked away from Cavraith 3 years before I'd found him dying by that river. The woman who'd chosen Alpha Draven Shadowbane of Apex Ridge over the fated mate the moon goddess had given her. The woman who'd destroyed Cavraith so completely that I'd spent months piecing him back together. She didn't look ashamed. Didn't even have the decency to look surprised. Just mildly inconvenienced, like I'd walked in on her changing clothes rather than fucking my mate on my bed. "Thali," she said, using my childhood nickname like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't just shattered my entire existence. "We didn't hear you come in." We, like they were a unit. Like this was normal. "This isn't," Cavraith started, pulling away from her, scrambling off the bed. "Thalindra, please, I can explain." But there were no words. No explanation that could possibly unmake what I'd seen. No combination of sounds that could erase the image now burned into my retinas. His hands on her body, her head thrown back, the pleasure on both their faces. My hand went to my stomach, to the tiny life growing there. The life I'd been so excited to tell him about just seconds ago. Our child. His heir. The thing we'd been waiting 8 years for. And I'd found him inside my sister on the same day I discovered I was finally pregnant. I ran. My feet carried me backward, away from that room, away from those faces, away from the life I thought I'd had. I heard Cavraith shouting my name, heard him cursing, heard the scramble of movement as he presumably tried to find his clothes, but I was already gone. Down the stairs through corridors that blurred into watercolor smears. pack members reached for me, voices concerned asking what was wrong. But I shoved past them, my wolf clawing at my insides, begging to shift, begging to run, begging to escape this skin that had witnessed something it could never unsee. I burst through the main doors and into the forest. The pine-scented air hit my lungs like knives. My vision was swimming, tears or shock or both, and I stumbled on roots and rocks, catching myself on tree trunks, leaving scratches on my palms that I couldn't feel through the numbness. My stomach lurched again, and this time when I vomited, it wasn't morning sickness. It was horror. It was betrayal. It was 8 years of devotion and sacrifice, and love being purged from my body in violent heaves that left me gasping and shaking on my hands and knees. How long? How long had they been doing this? How many times had he touched her while I was downstairs brewing those disgusting teas? How many times had he marked her skin while I was meeting with healers? How many times had they laughed about me? The pathetic, barren Luna who couldn't satisfy her mate, who couldn't give him an heir, who was so desperate to please him that she didn't notice when he brought her own sister into their bed. Except I wasn't barren. I was pregnant. Finally, devastatingly pregnant. And the joy I'd felt just minutes ago had curdled into something black and poisonous and sharp. I don't know how long I stayed there in the dirt, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, my nails digging into the earth like I could anchor myself to something solid. Time lost meaning. The sun moved across the sky. Shadows lengthened. Birds called to each other in the canopy above, oblivious to the fact that my world had just ended. Eventually, when I had no tears left, when my body was wrung dry and hollow, I stood. My legs shook. My dress was filthy with dirt and vomit and pine needles. My hair had come loose from its braid, hanging in tangled waves around my face. But I was standing, and standing meant I could move. I walked, one foot in front of the other, moving on pure instinct toward the only place that felt safe. Alawan. Alawan's cottage sat on the far edge of pack territory, nestled in a grove of silver birch trees that glowed white in the fading light. It was small, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was hers, bought with money she'd earned working as a seamstress for the pack. She'd always refused to live in the pack house, valuing her independence too much to be swallowed by pack politics. I'd always envied her that freedom. The door opened before I could knock. Alawan stood there, petite and fierce, with copper-colored hair braided intricately, and green eyes that could see straight through any lie. Those eyes widened when they landed on me, taking in my disheveled appearance, my tear-stained face, the way I was shaking like a leaf in a storm. "Thali?" She pulled me inside immediately, her hands gentle but firm. Sweet moon goddess, what happened? I opened my mouth to answer and found I couldn't form words. My throat had closed completely, and a fresh wave of tears was already building behind my eyes. Alawan seemed to understand. She guided me to the small couch by her fireplace, warmth and crackling flames and the smell of sage, and just held me. Didn't ask questions. Didn't demand explanations. Just wrapped her arms around me and let me break completely against her shoulder. The sobs came again, violent and raw, sounds I didn't know I could make. They tore from somewhere deep inside my chest, from a place that had held 8 years of insecurity and fear, and now this ultimate betrayal that made everything else look small by comparison. "I'm pregnant," I finally gasped out when I could breathe again. Alawan went very still against me, then she pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, her face transforming with joy. "Thali, that's wonderful. I found Kavraith in bed with Azrien." The joy vanished instantly. Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, fury, disbelief, murderous rage. Her wolf rose to the surface, her eyes flashing gold, her canines lengthening slightly. "I'm going to kill him," she said, her voice dropping into a growl. "I'm going to shift and tear his throat out and mount his head on... No." I grabbed her hands, holding tight. No, Elowen. I need to think. I need to figure out what to do. What to do? She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Thali, he cheated on you. With your sister. In your bed. There's nothing to figure out. You reject the bond, leave the pack, and let him rot. I'm pregnant with his heir. The words tasted like ash. I can't just leave. Why not? Because I stopped, realizing I didn't have a good answer. Because pack law said Lunas couldn't abandon their alphas? Because 8 years of my life was invested in this bond? Because some small, pathetic part of me still loved him, despite what I'd seen? I want to leave, I heard myself whisper. I want to disappear and never see him again and raise this pup somewhere far away where no one knows who I am. Alawan's expression softened. Then do it. I can't. You can. She squeezed my hands. Thali, you're the strongest person I know. You survived 8 years of pack politics and judgment and pressure that would have broken lesser wolves. You can survive this too. Not alone. You won't be alone. I'll help you. I stared at her, hope and fear warring in my chest. You'd do that? Risk exile from the pack? For you? In a heartbeat? She smiled, fierce and determined. Besides, I've always wanted to see what life is like outside Mountain Shadow. This is the perfect excuse. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, sharp and slightly hysterical. You're insane, says the woman who wants to run away in the middle of the night while pregnant with the Alpha's child. She stood, already moving into planning mode. All right. We need to leave tonight before Kavraith gets his head out of his ass and comes looking for you. I have contacts in the Dead Moon Pack. They're 3 days north, accept outsiders, and ask very few questions. We can get you set up there with a new identity. Dead Moon Pack, I repeated, testing the words. I knew of them, a mid-sized territory known for its thriving trade district and progressive alpha. They'd recently opened their borders to refugees from smaller packs that had been absorbed or destroyed in territorial disputes. You'll live as a commoner, Elowen continued, pacing now. No one needs to know you were a Luna. You can say you're a widow. Your mate died in a territorial dispute and you're starting over. What about the pup? I placed my hand on my stomach, that protective instinct already blazing bright. Kavraith is the father. If anyone finds out, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, you need to get away from here. You need space to grieve and heal and decide what you want. Not what the pack needs. Not what Kavraith wants. What you want. What did I want? I wanted to not hurt anymore. I wanted to close my eyes without seeing Azrien's head thrown back in ecstasy. I wanted to feel joy about this pregnancy instead of this sick, twisted bitterness. I wanted to matter to someone, to be chosen for more than just my title. I want to leave, I said, the decision crystallizing in my chest. Tonight, before I lose my nerve. Elowen grinned, fierce and wild. Then let's get you packed. We left under a new moon, 3 hours past midnight, when even the guards were drowsy at their posts. I'd returned to the pack house only once, moving through the corridors like a ghost. Our bedroom door was closed, but I could hear voices inside, Kavraith, and presumably Azrien, arguing in low tones. I didn't stop to listen. Didn't want to know what excuses he was crafting, what lies he was preparing. I went to my study instead and gathered only what I needed. Clothes, coins I'd been saving for years, a few pieces of jewelry I could sell if necessary. I left my Luna ceremonial robes hanging in the wardrobe. Left the silver circlet that marked my status on the dresser. Left every physical reminder of who I'd been. I was no longer Luna Thalindra Thornwick of Mountain Shadow Pack. I was just Thalindra, a woman with a growing child and a shattered heart and a desperate need to disappear. Alawan was waiting for me at the border, 2 travel packs slung over her shoulders and determination written across her face. She handed me 1 pack without a word, and we slipped into the forest together. The journey to Dead Moon territory took 3 days, as promised. We traveled mostly at night, sleeping in hidden groves during the day, avoiding main roads and pack borders. Elowen had done this before. helped runaways and refugees escape bad situations, and she moved with practiced efficiency. On the second night, as we huddled around a small fire, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you still love him?" I stared into the flames, watching them dance and flicker. Yes. Even after what he did? Love doesn't disappear just because someone breaks your heart, Elowen. I wish it did. I wish I could hate him cleanly, but I just feel empty. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "He'll search for you. You know that, right? Once he realizes you're really gone. Let him search." My hand went to my stomach, to the secret growing there. He won't find us. And when he finally gives up, maybe then I can start healing. But even as I said it, I wondered if that was possible. If hearts this shattered ever truly healed. Or if they just learned to beat around the broken places. We reached Dead Moon territory on the 4th morning, the sun rising behind us as we crossed the border. The land here was flatter than mountain shadow, rolling hills instead of mountains, deciduous forests instead of pines. It felt foreign and strange, and perfect. Elowen's contact was a middle-aged she-wolf named Mirette, who ran a boarding house in the outer district. She asked no questions when Elowen introduced me as her cousin, recently widowed and looking for a fresh start. Just showed us to a small cottage on the edge of her property, 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen, and quoted a monthly rent that was surprisingly reasonable. "Thank you," I told Elowen later, after we'd settled in. "For everything. For coming with me. For—" "I'm not staying," she interrupted gently. My stomach dropped. "What?" "I have to go back, Tholly. If I disappear at the same time you do, they'll know I helped you. They'll come looking. But if I return, act surprised. Claim I haven't seen you." She shrugged. "It buys you time. But I'll visit when I can. Bring supplies. Check on you and the pup. But I can't stay." She hugged me tightly. "You're going to be fine. You're stronger than you know." She left that afternoon, and I was alone for the first time in my life. Truly, completely alone. I should have been terrified. Should have felt lost and overwhelmed and desperate. Instead, I felt free. Chapter 3. Pregnancy, I discovered, was both a blessing and a curse. The nausea lasted for 12 weeks, coming in waves that left me weak and shaking. I learned to keep dried crackers by my bedside, to avoid strong smells, to recognize the warning signs seconds before my stomach would revolt. The cottage had a small wash basin that became my constant companion during those early weeks. But beneath the sickness, beneath the exhaustion that had me sleeping 14 hours a day, there was wonder. I was growing a life, creating a soul from nothing. My body was working magic that 8 years of trying had never achieved, and now it was happening naturally, easily, without herbs or prayers or desperate hope. By week 16, my belly started to show. Just a small swell that I could hide beneath loose clothing, but it was there. Real. Proof that I hadn't imagined that visit to Pack Dr. Aldwin. By week 20, I felt the first flutter. A tiny movement like butterfly wings against my insides. I'd been sitting in the cottage garden, mending a torn dress when it happened. I'd gone completely still, my hand flying to my stomach, wondering if I'd imagined it. Then it came again. Stronger this time. A distinct press against my palm from the inside. "Hello, little one," I'd whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'm your mama, and I promise I'm going to keep you safe." The months passed slowly and quickly all at once. Summer faded into autumn. Leaves turned gold and red and fell from the trees. My belly grew round and heavy. Random she-wolves from the boarding house started bringing me food, offering advice, sharing their own pregnancy stories. They thought I was a widow named Sarah, grieving my mate while preparing for my pup, and I let them believe it. It was easier than the truth. Elowen visited 3 times during those months, always under cover of darkness, always bringing supplies and news from Mountain Shadow territory. "He's searching for you," she'd reported during her second visit, her face grim. "Sent trackers to every neighboring pack. offered rewards for information. The pack is in chaos. Half of them think you're dead. The other half think you abandoned him. Let them think what they want. I'd wrapped my hands around the mug of tea she'd brought. I'm not going back. And Azrienne? What about her? She's still there. Still with him, as far as I can tell. The pack is scandalized, but he's the alpha. No one can stop him. That had hurt more than I'd expected. Knowing he'd chosen her, even after I'd disappeared. Knowing he'd replaced me so easily with the woman who'd destroyed him first. But I'd pushed the pain down deep and focused on the life growing inside me. That was all that mattered now. I went into labor on a frigid January night, 6 weeks before I'd expected. The pain started as a dull ache in my lower back, gradually intensifying into waves that stole my breath. Mirette sent for the pack, midwife, a stern woman named Helga, who took one look at me and started barking orders. Get water boiling, find clean linens, and you, she pointed at me. Stop looking so terrified. Pups have been born since the dawn of time. You'll survive this. I survived it. Barely. 16 hours of labor that felt like being torn apart from the inside out. 16 hours of pain so intense I understood why they called it labor. It was work, brutal and exhausting, my body doing things I had no control over. I screamed. I cursed. I begged the moon goddess to either let me die or let this end. And then, finally, blessedly, I felt something shift. Helga was shouting encouragement. My body was bearing down, pushing, forcing this life out of me and into the world. One final push, and suddenly the pressure was gone, replaced immediately by a sound that made my heart stop. Crying. High-pitched and furious, and alive. It's a boy, Helga announced, holding up a small, wriggling, red-faced creature covered in blood and vernix. A strong, healthy boy with working lungs. A son. I had a son. They cleaned him quickly and placed him on my chest, skin to skin, and the moment I felt his weight against me, the moment those tiny fists curled against my breast, I understood love in a way I never had before. This wasn't the love I'd felt for Kavraith, conditional and earned and always uncertain. This was absolute, primal, a love so fierce it terrified me, because I would burn the world down to keep this child safe. What will you name him? Helga asked. I looked down at my son, his amber eyes just barely open, his dark hair plastered to his small head, his face scrunched in disapproval at being forced into cold air after 9 months of warm darkness. Zephyrin, I whispered. His name is Zephyrin. It meant west wind in the old language, a force of nature, untamed and free. Everything I hoped he would become. Everything I would never be again. The first 3 years of Zephyr's life were both the hardest and the most beautiful of my existence. Being a mother was relentless. Endless feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights when he'd scream for hours for no reason I could determine. My body ached constantly. My eyes were permanently shadowed with exhaustion. I wore the same 3 dresses on rotation because everything else was stained with spit-up or worse. But gods, he was worth it. Every milestone, his first smile, his first laugh, the first time he rolled over, felt like witnessing magic. He grew quickly, transforming from a helpless infant into a curious toddler who wanted to touch everything, taste everything, explore everything. He had Kavraith's amber eyes and fearless nature, my stubborn determination and sharp wit. He was perfect. By age 2, he was speaking in full sentences, asking endless questions that made my brain hurt. Why is the sky blue, Mama? Where do stars go in the daytime? Why don't birds have arms? By age 3, he was climbing trees higher than I was comfortable with, chasing butterflies with single-minded determination, and charming every adult in the boarding house with his gap-toothed grin. Why don't I have a papa? He'd asked one morning while we were having breakfast in the cottage. I'd frozen, my spoon halfway to my mouth. I'd been dreading this question, knowing it would come eventually, but hoping for later. Much later. Not everyone has a papa, little wind, I'd said carefully. Some families are just mama and pup. But Jory has a papa, and Mira has a papa. Why don't I? Because your papa had to go away before you were born, and he can't come back. Why? Because that's just how things are sometimes. He'd accepted this with the easy adaptability of children, going back to his porridge without further question. But I knew the questions would come again, more complex each time, until eventually I'd have to decide how much truth he deserved. But that was a problem for future me. Present me had more immediate concerns, like the fact that my savings were almost gone, and I needed work. Finding employment as a single mother with no references proved harder than expected. The merchants in the trade district wanted workers who could commit to long hours without distraction. The pack house needed servants, but that required background checks and pack integration that would expose my true identity. The Seamstresses Guild required apprenticeship I didn't have time to complete. I was running out of options when I saw the help wanted sign at the Crimson Moon. It was a brothel in the commercial district, a fact that should have sent me running in the opposite direction. But the sign specified they were looking for a steward, not working girls. Someone to manage books, serve drinks, keep the establishment running smoothly. I stared at that sign for a full 10 minutes, war raging inside my head. A brothel. A Luna working in a brothel. The elders would have strokes. Kavraith would be horrified. Azrienne would laugh herself sick. But none of them were here. None of them had spent the last 3 years scraping by on savings and charity. None of them understood what it meant to wake up terrified you wouldn't be able to feed your son. I pushed through the door before I could change my mind. The interior was surprisingly elegant, all red velvet and polished wood, and crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow prisms across the walls. Not the dark, seedy establishment I'd imagined. This was upscale, refined, catering to wealthy clients who could afford discretion. "Can I help you?" A woman appeared from a back room, middle-aged with sharp eyes and sharper clothing, her silver hair pulled into an intricate knot. "I'm here about the steward position." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Are you now?" She looked me up and down, assessing. "Any experience?" "I managed household finances and supply logistics for..." I caught myself just in time. A large estate. For 8 years. References? "The estate is closed now. I'm recently widowed and relocating." It wasn't technically a lie. The life I'd led at Mountain Shadowpack was dead. I was a widow to my old existence. The woman studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, warm and genuine. "I'm Madame Kestra. I run this establishment. And you are?" "Sarah." "Well, Sarah, I like your eyes. They're honest, even when your words aren't." She gestured to a door behind her. "Come to my office. Let's talk details." An hour later, I walked out of the Crimson Moon employed. The pay was fair, the hours manageable, and Madame Kestra had agreed to let me bring Zephyrin with me occasionally when I couldn't find childcare. It wasn't ideal, but it was work. Honest work that would keep us fed and housed. I started 3 days later. Working at the Crimson Moon was nothing like I'd expected. The girls were kind, sharing their dinner with me during breaks, teaching me which clients tipped well and which to avoid, offering to watch Zephyrin when they weren't entertaining. The working girls adored him. They'd spoil him with treats and attention, making him laugh with their colorful stories and dramatic gestures. He was growing up surrounded by women who sold their bodies but protected their hearts, and somehow that felt safer than anything Mountain Shadowpack had offered. This was our life now. Simple. Honest. Mine. And then, on a cold evening in late autumn, everything changed. Chapter 4. Alpha Dravon Shadowmere walked into the Scarlet Moon like he owned it, which, technically, he did. All businesses in Dead Moon territory paid taxes to the Alpha, but he'd never visited before. Always sent his beta to collect fees and handle any pack-related issues. I was in the main parlor, reviewing the weekly ledgers, when the door opened. The temperature seemed to drop. Every working girl in the room went still, their eyes widening, their postures automatically shifting into submission. I looked up and felt my breath catch. He was beautiful. Dangerously beautiful. All lean muscle and controlled power wrapped in expensive leather and fur. Dark hair fell past his shoulders, secured with silver clasps. Sharp cheekbones. A jaw that could cut glass. And eyes. Storm-gray eyes that swept the room like he could see through every lie, every secret, every desperate attempt to remain invisible. Those eyes landed on me and stopped. I lowered my head immediately, every instinct screaming that I was prey, and he was a predator who'd just noticed me. You. His voice was deep, smooth, the kind that vibrated in your chest. Come here. My hands were shaking as I set down the ledger. I crossed the parlor, acutely aware of every working girl watching, of Madame Kestra's sharp gaze tracking my movement. I stopped at a respectful distance and kept my eyes down. What's your name? He asked. Sarah. Alpha. The lie tasted like ash, but it was the only protection I had. Sarah. He tested it slowly. Look at me. I forced myself to meet his eyes. They were gray with flecks of silver that caught the lamplight, and for one terrifying second I thought he could see right through me. See Luna Thalindra hiding beneath commoner clothing and a false name. But his expression remained neutral. Curious, but not suspicious. You're the steward here? He asked. Yes, Alpha. Kestra speaks highly of your work. He gestured to the table in the corner, the best seat in the house. Bring me whiskey, the good bottle, and then you'll attend to me for the evening. My stomach dropped. Alpha, I don't work as... I'm not asking you to fuck me. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. I'm asking you to serve drinks and make conversation, unless that's beyond your capabilities. Heat flooded my cheeks. Of course not, Alpha. Then get the whiskey, Sarah. I retrieved the expensive bottle from Kestra's private stock, whiskey that cost more per glass than I made in a week, and returned to his table. My hands were steady as I poured, years of Luna training keeping them from shaking despite my racing heart. He took the glass but didn't drink, just studied me with those unnerving eyes. How long have you worked here? He asked. Nearly 6 months, Alpha. And before that? I was at Mirette's boarding house, helping with housekeeping and laundry. And before that? My throat tightened. I'd rather not discuss my past, if it pleases the Alpha. His eyes narrowed slightly. It doesn't particularly please me, but I'll allow it. He took a sip of whiskey. For now. We fell into silence. I stood there, bottle in hand, unsure if I was dismissed or expected to remain. The sounds of the brothel filled the space. Laughter from the working girls, low conversation from other patrons, music from somewhere upstairs. Sit, he said finally. Alpha, I'm giving you permission. Sit. I sat on the edge of the chair like it might bite me. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, made him look younger, less dangerous. You have a child, he said. Not a question. Panic spiked through me, cold and sharp. How did he know? Who had told him? Was this about Kavrith? Had my ex-husband somehow... Relax. His voice was gentle. Kestra mentioned it. Said you occasionally bring your son to work when you can't find care for him. Yes, Alpha. His name is Zephyrin. He's 3 years old. And the father? Here we go. The lie I'd practiced 100 times. He was a rogue, a traveler. When I told him I was pregnant, I let the sentence trail off, allowing him to fill in the blanks. He abandoned you. Drayvon's voice had gone cold, dangerous. Left you alone and pregnant. Yes, Alpha. Then he was a fool. He drained his glass and held it out for a refill. Any male who walks away from his mate and pup deserves to have his throat ripped out. He wasn't my mate, I said quietly. Just someone I cared for. Even worse. He shook his head. You're better off without him, Sarah. I know. We talked for hours that night. He asked questions, carefully worded, never pushing too hard when I deflected. I answered what I could, weaving truth and lies together so seamlessly I almost believed them myself. And somewhere during those hours, something shifted. He wasn't just an alpha anymore. He was intelligent, charismatic, easy to talk to in a way I hadn't experienced since I pushed that thought away, refused to compare him to Kavraith. When he finally left, he pressed a generous tip into my hand. More money than I'd make in a week. I'll be back, he said, next week, and I want you to serve me again. It wasn't a request. Yes, Alpha, I whispered. I watched him leave, feeling something dangerous stirring in my chest. Something I hadn't felt in almost 2 years. Interest. Connection. The faint stirring of possibility. I shoved it down immediately. Reminded myself of all the reasons getting involved with any male, especially an alpha, was a terrible idea. Drayvon returned the following week, and the week after that, and the week after that, always requesting me specifically, always generous with his tips, always asking questions that slowly, carefully dismantled the walls I'd built around myself. Tell me about Zephyrin, he said during his 3rd visit. What's he like? I smiled despite myself. He's fearless, curious, gets into everything. Yesterday I found him trying to climb onto the kitchen counter because he wanted to see what was in the top cupboard. Smart boy, takes after his mother. How would you know what I'm like? Because you're here. He gestured around the brothel. Alone. Raising a child in a strange pack. Working in a place most respectable wolves would turn their noses up at. That takes intelligence and courage. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. He took a sip of whiskey. Has he shifted yet? No, he's too young. Most pups don't shift until they're at least 5 or 6. But he has his wolf? Can feel it? I hesitated. This was dangerous territory, but Drayvon's expression was genuinely curious, not suspicious. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't taught him to look for it yet. I want him to have a normal childhood first, before all the pack politics and hierarchy and expectations. That's wise. Let him be a pup before he has to be a wolf. Something in my chest loosened slightly. He understood. This alpha who could have anything he wanted, who ruled an entire territory. He understood why I wanted to protect my son's innocence. Thank you, I said quietly. For what? For not judging me. For treating me like a person instead of just another commoner. His eyes softened. You're not just anything, Sarah. I think you're remarkable. The words hit me like a physical touch. I looked away quickly. I should check on the other patrons. Stay. His hand caught mine gently. Please, just a few more minutes. I stayed. By his 5th visit, Drayvon met Zephyrin. I'd brought my son to work that day because Mirette was ill and couldn't watch him. I'd planned to keep Zephyrin entertained in my office with toys and snacks, hoping he'd be well-behaved enough that no one would complain. But toddlers rarely cooperate with plans. I was reviewing invoices when I heard Madame Kestra's sharp voice from the parlor. Someone needs to control this child. My heart stopped. I ran from my office and found Zephyrin standing directly in front of Drayvon's table, staring up at the alpha with those fearless amber eyes. Hello, my son said with perfect confidence. You're really tall. I was across the room in seconds, scooping Zephyrin into my arms. Alpha Drayvon, I'm so sorry. He slipped out while I was working. I didn't mean for him to disturb. He's not disturbing me. Drayvon was smiling, that expression that made him look almost gentle. You must be Zephyrin. My son nodded enthusiastically. I'm almost 3. How old are you? Zephyrin, I hissed. You can't ask the alpha? 28, Drayvon answered easily. Much older than you, little man. That's really old. Zephyrin reached out suddenly, his small hand patting Drayvon's face with complete lack of fear. You have scratchy face? Like morning time? Drayvon laughed, a genuine warm sound that made every head in the brothel turn. That's called stubble. It happens when I haven't shaved. Do you have a wolf? Zephyr's eyes were wide with excitement. Mama says all grown-ups have wolves, but I don't have mine yet. Mama says I have to wait. Your mama is right, and yes, I have a wolf. He's much bigger than me. Can I see? Zephyr, I was mortified. That's enough. It's fine, Sarah. Draven crouched down, putting himself at Zephyr and eye level. I can't shift here, little man. It would scare the people. But maybe one day, if your mama agrees, I can show you. Would you like that? Yes. Zephyr squirmed in my arms, wanting down. Mama, please? Can the alpha show me his wolf? We'll see, I said, using the universal parent phrase for probably not. I'll take that as a maybe. Draven stood, his eyes meeting mine. There was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Warmth, interest, something deeper that made my breath catch. He's beautiful, Sarah, he said quietly. You've done an amazing job with him. Thank you, Alpha. Draven, he corrected. When it's just us, call me Draven. Chapter 5. Draven's visits increased after that night. Sometimes he came to the Scarlet Moon. Other times he'd arrive during daylight hours, finding excuses to stop by, checking on tax collections, discussing business with Madame Kestra, always managing to find a moment to talk to me, to talk to Zephyr. My son adored him, would light up whenever Draven appeared, launching into excited stories about whatever he'd discovered that day. And Draven, this powerful alpha who commanded an entire pack, would listen like Zephyr was sharing the secrets of the universe. He's good with him, Madame Kestra observed one evening after Draven had left. The alpha, I mean. Good with your boy. He is, I admitted, and with you. Her sharp eyes studied me. He looks at you like you're something precious, Sarah. Like you matter. He's just being kind. Alphas aren't kind without reason. He wants something from you. What could I possibly have that an alpha would want? Madame Kestra smiled knowingly. You really don't see it, do you? That man is falling for you. Hard. That's ridiculous, he barely knows me. He knows enough. And from what I've seen, you're falling for him too, whether you want to admit it or not. I wanted to deny it. Wanted to insist that I was just being friendly, professional, careful not to offend someone who could make my life very difficult. But Madame Kestra was right. I was falling. Slowly, terrifyingly, undeniably falling for Alpha Draven Shadowmere. 4 months after our first meeting, Draven made a strange offer. We were in the small garden behind the Scarlet Moon, watching Zephyr chase butterflies in the afternoon sun. It was one of those perfect spring days, warm but not hot, flowers blooming, birds singing. Peaceful. Safe. Come work at the pack house, Draven said suddenly. I looked at him startled. What? As my house steward. Better pay, better hours, better environment for Zephyr. He could have a real home, Sarah. Stability. Other children to play with. Access to the pack school. I have stability here. You have survival. That's not the same thing. He turned to face me fully. I'm not trying to insult what you've built. You've done remarkably well under circumstances I can't even imagine, but you deserve better. Zephyr deserves better. Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why do you care? I'm nobody. A widow with a child. A commoner. Why waste your time on us? Draven was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but intense. Because when I look at you, I see someone strong enough to survive something that should have destroyed her. Someone who puts her child above everything else, including her own happiness. Someone who works herself to exhaustion every day and still manages to smile when her son asks her to play. He shifted closer. I see someone remarkable, Sarah, and I'd like the chance to know her better, if she'll let me. My throat closed completely. Tears burned behind my eyes. I can't, I whispered. I'm not ready for... I'm not asking you to be ready. I'm asking you to let me help. To accept that maybe, possibly, you don't have to do everything alone anymore." He stood, offering me his hand. "Think about the job offer. No pressure. No expectations beyond professional duty. Just a chance at something better." I stared at his outstretched hand. This could be a trap. Could be manipulation disguised as kindness. Could be a dozen things that would end in heartbreak. Or it could be exactly what he said. A chance at something better. I didn't take his hand that day, but I didn't refuse the offer either. I accepted Drayvon's job offer 2 weeks later. The decision came during one of Zephron's tantrums, a spectacular meltdown, because I'd told him no, he couldn't have sweets before dinner. He'd thrown himself on the floor, screaming and kicking, and I'd stood there in our tiny room at Mirette's boarding house, exhausted and overwhelmed, and so tired of just surviving. Zephron deserved better than this. Deserved space to run and play, deserved other children and stability, and a future that wasn't defined by my fear. So I swallowed my pride and sent word to the pack house that I'd take the position. Drayvon's response came within hours. A cottage on pack house grounds, already furnished. Moving assistance, a generous salary, and a handwritten note that simply said, "Thank you for trusting me." I had no idea what my acceptance meant for him, but I hope he understood that it was for the sake of my son. The cottage was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with actual counter space, a small yard where Zephron could play safely, windows that let in sunlight instead of the dim, cramped quarters we'd been living in. "Mama, look!" Zephron ran from room to room, his excitement infectious. "I have my own bed, and look at all the space." I watched him explore, my heart simultaneously swelling and aching. This was right. This was what he needed, even if it terrified me. Working at the pack house was different than I'd expected. I managed Drayvon's household staff, coordinating cleaning schedules, organizing supplies, handling correspondence. It was similar to my work as Luna, but without the suffocating weight of pack politics and judgment. The staff treated me with respect. Not because of my title, they didn't know I'd ever been Luna, but because I was competent, fair, good at my job. It felt revolutionary. Drayvon was professional during work hours, never overstepping, never making me uncomfortable, but there were moments, brief, charged moments, where something passed between us, when our hands would brush reaching for the same document, when he'd smile at something I said, his eyes warm with affection, when I'd catch him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name but felt in my bones. And 3 months after I started working for him, everything changed. Chapter 6. It was late evening. Most of the staff had gone home. I was finishing up paperwork in my small office when Drayvon appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, can we talk?" Something in his tone made my heart start racing. "Of course, Alpha." "Drayvon," he corrected, stepping inside and closing the door. "I need to be honest with you about something." Dread pooled in my stomach. This was it. He'd discovered the truth. Found out I was Luna Thalindra, runaway mate, hiding from Mountain Shadow Pack. This perfect life I'd built was about to shatter. "I have feelings for you," he said out of the blue. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at him, unable to process what I'd just heard. "I know it's complicated," he continued, words tumbling out faster now. "I know you've been hurt. I know you're not looking for a mate. But I can't keep pretending this is just friendship. Every time I see you, every conversation we have, every moment watching you with Zephron," he ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I'm falling for you, Sarah, and I needed you to know." I couldn't form words. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for an answer. I just needed to be honest. Needed you to know that when I offer help, when I spend time with you and Zephron, it's not out of pity or charity. It's because I care. Because I want to be part of your life. If you'll let me. Please. Take all the time you desire, Sarah. I promise to wait." and with the last words he left before I could respond, leaving me standing in my office with my world tilting sideways. But this time, it wasn't fear making everything unstable. It was hope. Dangerous, terrifying, beautiful hope. I started letting him in after that night, slowly, carefully, like approaching something wild that might bolt or bite. But Drayvon was patient, never pushed, never demanded more than I could give. He took us on small outings, walks through the market, visits to the PAC's public gardens, once a picnic by the river where Zephyrin could play safely. He brought gifts for my son, wooden toys, books, a stuffed wolf that Zephyrin immediately named Big Friend and refused to sleep without. He never brought me anything expensive, just small things. Tea I'd mentioned liking, a book of poetry, once a simple silver bracelet I'd been admiring at a market stall. "You don't have to buy me things," I'd protested. "I know. I want to." And slowly, incrementally, my guard came down. I started calling him Drayvon instead of Alpha. Started smiling without forcing it. Started letting myself imagine, just in brief, terrifying flashes, what it might be like to have this. To build something new from the ashes of everything I'd lost. 6 months after his confession, Drayvon walked me home after a late meeting. We'd been reviewing plans for expanding the Pack House Gardens, a project Zephyrin was particularly excited about because it meant more flowers for him to pick. The conversation had stretched longer than expected, and by the time we finished, the sun had set. "I'll walk you back to your cottage," Drayvon offered. "It's dark." "I know the way." "I know you do. Humor me anyway." We walked in comfortable silence, our footsteps crunching on the gravel path. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. Peaceful. Safe. When we reached my cottage, I turned to thank him. Found him looking at me with those storm-gray eyes full of longing and restraint. "Sarah," he said softly, "can I kiss you?" My breath caught. Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. That letting another Alpha into my heart was asking for destruction. That I wasn't healed enough, wasn't ready, wasn't brave enough. But another part, the part that had been slowly, painfully coming back to life, whispered, "What if?" "Yes," I breathed. He kissed me like I was precious, like I was something to be cherished rather than conquered. His hands were gentle in my hair, his lips soft against mine, and when we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "I need you to be sure, Sarah. Because once I let myself love you completely, I won't be able to stop." "I'm sure," I said. "I'm terrified, but I'm sure." "Then I'll do everything in my power to make sure you never regret this." We took it slow after that night. No marking, no official mating ceremony, just dating, a normal human concept that felt revolutionary. We had dinner together, went on walks, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Zephyrin adored Drayvon, and the feeling was clearly mutual. I'd catch the Alpha teaching my son to track in the forest, or reading him bedtime stories in voices that made Zephyrin giggle uncontrollably. "He's not mine," Drayvon had said once, watching Zephyrin sleep. "But I could love him like he is, if you'd let me." I'd cried then, because for the first time in 3 years, I felt like maybe my life could be more than survival. Maybe it could be joy. Chapter 7. 8 months into our relationship, Drayvon came to me with a proposition. "I have a business ally visiting next week," he said. We were in his study, reviewing monthly reports while Zephyrin played with his toys in the corner. Alpha Cavraith Thornwick of Mountain Shadow Pack. My blood turned to ice. The papers I'd been holding slipped from my fingers, scattering across the floor. "Sarah? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "Cavraith. Here, in Dead Moon territory. 1 week away." "Is it the project?" Drayvon looked concerned. "He wants to partner on building the largest, most luxurious brothel in the Northern Territories. Split profits and management. Since you have experience at the Scarlet Moon, I thought you could provide insight. When? I managed to choke out. Next Sunday. He'll arrive midday. I was hoping you'd join me at the border to welcome him, then attend the initial meeting to discuss management structures. I can't. The words burst out too loud, too panicked. Zephyrin looked up from his toys, his amber eyes worried. Mama? You okay? I'm fine, Starling, I lied. Keep playing. Drayvon stood, crossing to where I'd frozen. Sarah, talk to me. What's going on? Nothing. I don't feel comfortable being part of business meetings. I'm a steward, not an advisor. You're more than that, and you know it. His hands were gentle on my shoulders. Whatever you're afraid of, whatever this is, you can tell me. But I couldn't. How could I explain that the alpha he was planning to partner with was my ex-husband? The mate who'd betrayed me? The father of my child who didn't know his son existed? I need you there, Drayvon said quietly. Not just for business insight. I need you there because you ground me. Because having you beside me makes me a better leader. Because... He cupped my face gently. Because I'm in love with you, Sarah. And I want to start including you in every part of my life. If you'll let me. Those words. Those devastating, perfect words. I should have said no. Should have confessed everything right then. Should have grabbed Zephyrin and run as far and fast as I could. But instead, I heard myself say, all right, I'll be there. The week passed in a blur of anxiety and dread. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Kept playing out scenarios in my head, each one ending in disaster. Cavryth would recognize me immediately, would demand Zephyrin, would use pack law to tear my son from my arms. And a Drayvon, kind, patient Drayvon who'd given me everything, would hate me for the lies. I almost ran, packed bags 3 separate times, ready to disappear into the night. But something stopped me each time. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe that small, foolish part of me that hoped this could somehow work out. Maybe just the painful knowledge that I was so tired of running. Sunday arrived with cruel, beautiful weather. I dressed carefully, simple clothing appropriate for a steward. Nothing. That would draw attention. Braided my hair severely. Wore no jewelry except the silver bracelet Drayvon had given me. Armored myself in anonymity. Zephyrin was excited. Drayvon had said he could come. That meeting, visiting alphas, was educational for young pups. Will the other alpha have a big wolf too? Zephyrin asked as we walked to meet Drayvon. Probably, I managed. Will he be nice like Drayvon? I don't know, Starling. We met Drayvon at the pack house entrance. He looked magnificent in formal alpha clothing, dark leather and silver embroidery that announced his status. When he saw us, his face lit up. You look beautiful, he said, taking my hand and kissing my knuckles. I look plain. You could never look plain to me. He swung Zephyrin onto his shoulders, making my son laugh. Ready, little man? Ready. We walked to the border together, Drayvon, me, Zephyrin on his shoulders, and a small escort of warriors. The journey took 20 minutes through forest trails I'd walked dozens of times. Beautiful territory. Safe territory. Territory I'd thought I could finally call home. We reached the border just as Cavryth's party came into view. Everything inside me seized up. My lungs forgot how to work. My heart stuttered and stopped and restarted in a painful, erratic rhythm. Cavryth looked exactly the same. No, worse. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. Shadows beneath them. His jaw was harder, his expression grimmer. He dismounted, his movements fluid and powerful. His amber eyes swept over Drayvon's party and landed on me. I saw the exact moment recognition hit. Watched his eyes widen, his jaw go slack, every drop of color drain from his face. Thalindra, he breathed. The world stopped turning. Drayvon's hand tightened on mine. Beta Corin's eyes went wide. The warriors from both parties looked between us, sensing sudden tension. And Zephyrin, innocent, fearless Zephyrin, chose that moment to speak from his perch on Draven's shoulders. "Mama, why is that alpha staring at you?" "Mama." I watched that single word hit Kavraith like an arrow to the chest. His gaze snapped to Zephyrin, really seeing him for the first time, taking in the dark hair, the facial features that were mine but structured like his, and those eyes, those damning amber eyes. "You have a child," Kavraith said, his voice completely empty. "You have my child." Chapter 8. "Sarah?" Draven's voice was careful, controlled, but I heard the confusion underneath. What is he talking about? I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stand there while my carefully constructed life crumbled around me. "Her name isn't Sarah," Kavraith said, never taking his eyes off Zephyrin. His voice was hollow, like something had broken inside him. "It's Thalindra. Luna Thalindra Thornwick of Mountain Shadow Pack. My mate," his voice cracked. "My wife, who disappeared 3 years ago, who I thought was dead." "That's not," Draven started, but I cut him off. "He's telling the truth." The words tasted like ash. I couldn't look at Draven, couldn't bear to see the betrayal that would be written across his face. "My name is Thalindra. I was Luna of Mountain Shadow Pack. And Zephyrin," I swallowed hard, forcing the confession out. "Zephyrin is his son." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Kavraith moved, crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hand reaching for Zephyrin with desperate urgency. "Let me hold him. Let me hold my son." Draven stepped back, his body language shifting into something protective and dangerous. Zephyrin clung to his shoulders, suddenly aware that something was very wrong, his little face scrunching up like he might cry. "Don't touch him," Draven growled, and I heard his alpha power bleeding into the command. "That's my child." Kavraith's eyes had started glowing, his wolf rising to the surface. "My heir! You have no right. I have every right. He's been under my protection." "He's been stolen," Kavraith snarled, "hidden from me for 3 years. Do you have any idea what I've been through? What the pack has suffered thinking their Luna was dead?" His voice broke completely. "What it did to me, believing I'd driven you to your death, Thalindra. Knowing the last thing you saw was me with Azrienne. Living with that guilt every single day. And now I find out you've been here? Alive? Raising my son while playing house with another alpha?" "It wasn't like that," I whispered. "Then what was it like? Explain it to me." His hands were shaking, his whole body trembling with barely controlled emotion. "Explain how any of this is justified. You cheated on me." The words exploded out of me, 3 years of pain and rage finally finding voice. "In our bed, with my sister. On the same day I found out I was finally pregnant with your child. How dare you stand here and act like you're the victim?" "I know what I did." Kavraith's face crumpled and suddenly he looked broken rather than angry. "I know. It was unforgivable. I've spent every single day of the last 3 years trying to find you, trying to make it right, trying to—" He looked at Zephyrin again, his voice breaking. "I have a son I've missed everything for. His birth, his first words, his first steps. You stole that from me, Thalindra. You stole my dignity." My voice was shaking now, my whole body trembling. "My trust, my ability to ever feel safe with someone again. You destroyed me, Kavraith. I was just trying to survive. By lying to me?" Draven's voice cut through the argument like a blade. I turned to find him staring at me with an expression that made my heart shatter. Not anger. Worse. Betrayal. 3 years, Sarah. Thalindra. Whoever you are. 3 years of lies. Did any of it mean anything to you? Or was I just convenient? No. I reached for him, but he stepped back, still holding Zephyrin. "Draven, please. Everything I felt for you was real. I didn't know how to tell you." I was afraid. Of what? That I'd judge you for running from a cheating mate? His laugh was bitter. I would have understood that, would have helped you, protected you. But instead you lied, made me fall for someone who doesn't even exist. She exists, I insisted desperately. The person I am with you, that's real. The life we built was built on lies. He finally lowered Zephyrin to the ground, and my son immediately ran to me, wrapping his small arms around my legs. I can't trust anything you've told me. Can't believe anything we had was genuine. It was genuine. Dravon, please. Alpha Dravon, Cavraith interrupted, his voice hardening into something cold and formal. We need to discuss this properly. There are laws that govern situations like this. Pack laws that supersede personal feelings. Don't. I pulled Zephyrin closer, my voice breaking. Don't bring pack law into this. It's already involved, Cavraith said. The moment you took my heir and hid him from his pack, you violated ancient laws. Laws that are very clear about what happens to Luna who abandon their posts. About what happens to alpha heirs kept from their rightful territory. What are you saying? Dravon asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. I'm saying that by pack law, the child belongs with me, in Mountain Shadow territory, being raised as the heir he was born to be. Cavraith's amber eyes locked onto mine. And Thalindra, as my Luna, my mate who never formally rejected our bond, is bound to return as well. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, you can't. I can. And I will. He stepped forward, his voice softening slightly. Thalindra, please. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was unforgivable. But we can work through this. For our son's sake. For the pack. For you, I finished bitterly. This is about what you want. What you need. Just like it always was. It's about our son. His voice rose again. He deserves to know his father. Deserves to be raised in his rightful place. He deserves to be happy, I shouted back. To feel safe. To not be used as a weapon in your quest for redemption. Mama? Zephyrin's small voice cut through the argument. He was crying now, confused and frightened. Why is everyone yelling? I sank to my knees, pulling him into my arms. I'm sorry, Starling. I'm so sorry. Everything's going to be okay. But it wasn't going to be okay. I could see it in Cavraith's determined expression, in Beta Corin's sympathetic but resigned face, in the way Dravon was looking at me, like I was a stranger who'd deceived him. Pack law was absolute. An alpha's heir belonged with the alpha. And I, as an unmated Luna who'd never formally rejected the bond, was still legally bound to Cavraith. I was trapped. And this time, there was no running. To be continued in Part 2. What will Thalindra choose? Can she ever forgive the alpha who shattered her world, or will her heart forever belong to the one she left behind? Will Pack Law steal her son from her arms, or will she find a way to fight the impossible system designed to control her? And most devastatingly, can a woman torn between two alphas, two lives, two futures, ever truly choose when both paths lead to heartbreak? The stakes have never been higher. The choice has never been more impossible. Drop a comment below if you can't wait for Part 2. Tell us, do you think she should fight for her freedom with Dravon, or accept her fate with Cavraith for Zephyryn's sake? Your thoughts matter. Your voice matters. And this story? It's just beginning. See you in Part 2, where everything you think you know changes.